This is my journal from 2017. Despite the fact that it sits right next to my bed, I've never been actually able to read what I've written because I have a vague memory of what it was and a very clear memory of what I was going through at the time. And so I'm always too scared and uncomfortable and sad to read it again. It's almost funny in a way to be able to remember so vividly how I used to feel and think when I was a child or teenager or even in my early 20s, and yet be so unable to relate to the sort of girl that I used to be. As someone who's spent most of her life being quite chaotic, anxious and sad and scared, I feel now, as I'm wrapping up my 20s, I'm looking back and realizing that I've gotten so lucky, both through running into some incredible people, but also through lots of work in therapy and reading and amateur psychology, which basically have completely transformed so much in my life, especially relating to my anxiety and how I feel and function in the world. So if you're also on this journey of trying to go from sad and anxious to happy and calm, here are 5 evidence-based things that I wish so bad someone could have taught and told me when I was a lot younger, because if you're anything like me, these might also help. I'll be talking about things in the domains of studying, work, and getting things done in your 20s, relationships, friendships, and connection with people, your view on yourself and self-worth, and also health and body. Of course, all of these things are very, very related, but I've picked them out to try and focus on them all a bit more. So let's get rid of this and let's get straight into it. So the first biggest change for me was in the domain of work, tasks, studying, and getting things done. And this was breaking down and analyzing the reasoning and the logic behind my anxiety itself. Because even though I always thought of it as a feeling or experience, there actually are some really hard premises behind it, and understanding those makes it easier to challenge and change things. And when I did this, I also realized that a lot of the time anxiety had actually been quite helpful for me or necessary for me, to the point that I was almost unconsciously fueling it myself. So let me try to explain this. Every time I've been anxious or really sad, I've definitely hated the feeling. At the worst, I would wish that I could just be unconscious and skip a few days or weeks or months, or I would strongly daydream that I could change into anyone else and just live their life and hope that they would have less anxiety than me. So I definitely hated it. However, I could not deny that anxiety was super useful when it comes to getting things done. The more anxious I am about a task or a job or a conversation or a person, the more energy, thought, and work I put into my interactions and getting ready for it. And very often this sort of thing gets rewarded. And it's such a dangerous rabbit hole to fall into when you realize that anxiety is actually a really powerful way to get yourself to perform at a really high standard. I'm not sure if consciously or unconsciously, but I did become an expert at almost immediately increasing my anxiety when I am working or getting ready to do tasks, and keeping it very, very high, to the point that it was almost constantly high throughout my days. Whenever I was conscious, I was super anxious, and that went from making me a super productive person to being non-functioning at all. So today I wanted to break down and show you the 3 main ways that I increased my anxiety, because if you're still in the stage where it's quite nebulous and doesn't really make sense, if I show you mine, maybe there might be things that you resonate with and you can kind of understand it a bit more. And then I'm going to show how I replaced this way of thinking with something much more productive and helpful and calmer when it comes to getting things done. So the very first way that I could induce an anxiety increase is by inflating the importance of anything that I had to do. So this is thinking that every exam is a reflection of my intelligence. The way that I present myself or am perceived by people is a reflection of who I am and is very, very important. The way that I dress reflects how important I am or how likely I am to make friends. The way that this conversation goes is a reflection of my future with this person or how much my boss likes me or hates me. So by making everything feel a lot more important in my mind, I would become more anxious about it, pay it more attention, and then do better at this task. The second way I automatically increase my anxiety is by telling myself that I I am incompetent. So this is a narrative in my mind that I am stupider than other people, slower than other people, more selfish than other people. I find it harder to do things. I am unluckier. I am poorer. Even issues about things that I cannot change about myself, like my race and my identity. Combining all of these things put me in a mindset that gave me so much fear and worry about everything that I had to do, and meant that, oh my God, you are starting on such a back foot. You need to work 10 times harder to get where other people are. And this really fuels a lot of hard work for me. Hopefully it's apparent already that a lot of these are not great things to be telling yourself all the time, but I'm going to move on to the third way, which is raising the consequences of everything that I do. So I would think, for example, if I don't perform excellently at this task, I will be fired from this job. Or if I am not intelligent enough or interesting enough, my friends will never want to talk to me again. Or if I fail at this task, then I'm going to be kicked out of university. Or if I don't get a certain percentage in something, then everyone will think that I am stupid, or I will fail the next exam. So this is the kind of raising consequences in my mind. So a combination of these is what I would automatically use in order to make myself anxious, perform better at things, and happy days, right? But in all seriousness, this wasn't second nature to me. I wasn't doing it consciously. It became first nature, automatic. This was the way that I was constantly thinking of and feeling about myself. And it's very interesting now looking back. I don't know when I realized this hack about anxiety and when I started to do this, because it must have been so early on in my life, because I cannot remember a time where I didn't feel this way about myself and I didn't think about myself in all these negative ways. And these are not just things that I created. A few of them, or a lot of them, most of them, are things that were told to me that I just internalized because they were useful to do things. And this was the constant narrative that was going on in my mind. But the main realization here is that being worked up is not necessary to work. And fully accepting this has been absolutely huge. I always thought that in order to do anything, I need to wind myself up, terrify myself, scare myself, feel like an idiot, and then I can be like, oh my God, panic mode, let's get started. But as I'm winding myself up and increasing the stakes for everything, and on the other hand, the stakes in life are just increasing naturally as I'm getting older, this is just not sustainable. And at some point, this level of panic was no longer helpful in getting me to do things, but it was giving me so much fear that I was just paralyzed and could not do anything at all. And so I had to kind of go to the basics and see what was the issue with me getting things done in the first place, and why had I just hacked it into just making myself anxious. Now, I'm generally not a fan of grouping people according to types and personalities and things like this, but this is one that I actually agree with and I think is super helpful. Gretchen Rubin has written a book called The Four Tendencies, where she divides people into 4 groups depending on how they work on tasks or how they get motivated or unmotivated to do things. If you want to read this book, I'll put a link below where you can get a free summary of it, so you can check it out if that's something that you're into. But what this book fully made me realize is that the main reason that I often don't do things is because I don't feel convinced that I need to do them at all. I'm a questioner, according to Gretchen, but the main thing here is I need to understand why I need to do something, why I need to do it now, why I'm not able to not do it. Why am I doing it this way? Why can I not do it in a better way? And why can I not just divide it and do it later, or just change everything up about this task? I have a lot of questions, and before I used to just shut these down and kind of hijack the system and just ramp up the anxiety to the point that even if it was terrible, I would just do it because I was so scared. But what I do now instead is, instead of getting super anxious and wound up about something, I, in my mind, turn into this super patient parent talking to a toddler. And whenever I need to do something, especially if it's really difficult or major for me to do, I just answer all of these questions in my head. Like, why do I need to study? Why do I need to study now? Why do I need to study today? When is the exam? Why does this make sense? Is there another time that I could replace this that is better? Is that true? Am I actually going to do this? And I know this sounds really, really tiring, and it kind of is, but it does get me to the point where very peacefully I can accept, okay, I get this. Like, this just needs to be done now, and it feels like a reasonable time, and I can do the other thing that I want to do later. And these sort of conversations kind of keep me in a much lower anxiety level, and I'm happy to research reasons that I need to do things, to question my choices again and again. This is a lot calmer for me as a questioner than having to kind of force myself to feel really, really insecure in order to get things done. I would also recommend that you figure out what's the best way to get yourself to work. This is one framework that I think is incredible, because it might be so much better to avoid having to use that self-induced anxiety that might just be a habit by now that you might have done, like me, for the whole of your life. And also, when I have deep-lying anxieties about specific things that just come up again and again, I ask myself, what am I benefiting from this? Because even though I know the experience is terrible, the fact that it's survived for so long and it's still there must be giving me a benefit somewhere else in life. And usually it's there. And then when I see that benefit, I try to replace it with a healthier way of thinking or with another solution, or completely removing the activity if necessary in order to kind of reduce these high anxieties in my life and the peaks. So yeah, I hope that made sense. My second point has to do more with that background anxiety that is a bit more insidious and less potentially understood by ourselves. And to do this, I'm going to use a long example, which I'm not going to apologize for because I genuinely think everyone should hear the story because it's absolutely incredible. So let me try to explain it. Basically, Skinner, who's really famous for doing classical conditioning, he had this experiment where he was trying to teach a pigeon to throw a bowling ball. And the theory was him and his scientist friends would put this bird in a cage with a ball, wait with some snacks as a reward for the bird, and wait for the bird to kick the ball, give it a reward, kick again, give another reward, so the bird would kick the ball. Makes perfect sense, has been done so many times. But they were sitting for hours and hours and hours, and the bird never kicked the ball, so they just gave up and threw away the whole experiment. Next time, however, one of them had an idea where they would do incremental positive reinforcement, which is basically rewarding the bird for small steps. So let's say the bird looked in the direction of the ball, it would get a reward. Let's say the bird looked at the ball, got a reward. Touched the ball, got a reward. Nudged the ball, got a reward. Kicked the ball, got a reward. In this way, every single time within a few minutes, they would be training the bird perfectly to do this activity through incremental positive reinforcement rather than just positive reinforcement classically. And very interestingly, Marion and Keller Brilland, which were a couple that were working with Skinner, actually quit their jobs on that day and they opened an animal training kind of agency, which turned into a massive empire. And those are the people now responsible for training things like dolphins to do crazy stuff. So incremental positive reinforcement is so powerful. It's one of the strongest tools in order to get everything done. It works both with positive and with negative consequences. And Skinner himself actually related this to human behavior and to children and said that when parents are ignoring their children's healthy and positive requests for attention, the children then get more creative and do behaviors that we might consider to be annoying or not positive. And therefore, to fix this, parents should actually be very responsive to their children. Now, the reason I am mentioning this is that I find that in my personal life, I have been trained and I keep training myself to ignore my needs. And this leads to huge mountains of background anxiety, seemingly for no reason, because I have been ignoring myself and the things that I need consistently for absolutely ages. Anxiety and sadness for me is very often the accumulation of consistent and persistent neglect of my signals and needs rather than a rare, isolated, tragic event. And realizing this has been incredibly powerful. Very often, anxiety or stress has crept up on me where nothing specific has happened that is bad, and suddenly I am having a terrible experience and I'm feeling awful and I do not know and I could not tell you what the reason is. If people ask me, I don't know. It's nothing, it's everything. I just feel really bad. And this is probably because I've ignored 1,000 things and 1,000 times that I've been requesting myself to do or to have or to take. And this is a huge problem. The biggest learning point for me has been to learn to notice and pay more attention internally. It's actually a trauma response. It's actually been very well established and studied by people like John Bowlby, who worked on attachment theory. Adults who are neglecting their own needs and their own personal selves are probably adults who used to be children who had to externalize a lot of their attention. Being very attentive to adults' needs or to other person's needs doesn't only need to be if you had openly abusive parents, but even if you had inconsistent parenting or parents who had mood swings or who would treat you in various different ways, this meant that you would have to be very alert as a child and pay more attention to your external world rather than your internal world, because we only have a limited amount of attention. As you grow up with this habit, it then becomes the case that you are not as trained to realize what's going on with you, and therefore you're never responding to your own needs. This can accumulate, this neglect can accumulate and show up, in my case, as sadness or anxiety, because I've just not been dealt with very well, and I'm the one taking care of myself right now. In my case, it's been an incredible cure for anxiety to just answer the very simple question of, what do you need? This is the most powerful question I've ever used. I can use it when I'm having a complete emotional meltdown, and that's most often when I do remember to use it, although I am getting slightly better. But answering this question with brutal honesty, I need rest. I need to stop this task. I need food. I need to sleep more. I need love. I need to be hugged. I need to be heard by someone. I need to not do this thing that everyone is asking me to do. And this very honest and brutal question, and trying to get as close to fulfilling this for myself, has been the best way for me to get over things. Also, as someone who is very headstrong and often completely irrational, in the sense that sometimes when I'm working on something, I can be completely stuck on it for hours and I have no ability to step away. And very often this is when I get very tired or frustrated, or then later anxious. And people can see me in this state and go, oh, I think you need to take a little break because you're not looking too well, which is a perfectly reasonable thing to say. I cannot do this. I cannot take this information. But there's this weird loophole here where if I ask myself, what do I need? And the answer is obviously, I think I'm actually needing a break from this, I can step away within seconds. So this question, honestly, it sounds so simple, but it is incredibly powerful. And the more you can implement it into your day-to-day, and kind of, I have this mini reminder in my head, which is just like, go in, Elizabeth, go in, just like think what's happening with you right now. And of course, not to the point of extreme selfishness, but if you sit on my end of the spectrum and you're kind of always trying to pay attention to other people and quite anxious, it might be just helpful to just go inwards and go, this is not a great place for me to be right now. I actually need some rest. I think I've overdone it. I think I've worked enough. I think I need to do some more. I think I need some rest. I think I need some food. Even the basics sometimes are things that I can really forget. And taking care of this consistently has genuinely transformed my baseline anxiety. Number 3 has to do with relationships, people, connections, friendships, things like that. For this, I'm going to focus on John Gottman, for whom I could make a series of videos because I am obsessed with these man's studies. So what he did was that he would take couples' relationships, sit them down and ask them to have a 5-minute discussion about a topic that had been bothering them. And he would record these conversations. He watched through and analyzed hundreds, if not thousands of couples. And after kind of taking all their traits and all their behaviors down, he then was able to create rules for what successful and unsuccessful relationships had in common, to the point that he could look at a couple and within seconds or minutes could predict with 94% accuracy if these people were likely to have a long, healthy, happy relationship, or if they were likely to be dysfunctional and break up. And this is not kind of prophecy. This is genuinely just through science. And he published all of these findings. It's incredible. Honestly, would really recommend reading his work and research and studies. One of the things that I'm going to mention here, because it's very closely tied to anxiety in friendships and connections and relationships, is that he identified that one of the best predictors for how people would fare in a relationship was how likely were they to be able to keep the positive aspects of their partner in mind when having a difficult conversation or argument. The couples that were likely to break up were couples that when they were having an argument, if you would ask one of them, how do you feel about your partner right now? They would say, honestly, I do not know what I was thinking when I met them. They're awful, they're ugly, we have nothing in common. I must have been insane at that time, and I don't know, it's just so stupid. And they can say that they love them or have connection with them, but their view of their past and everything that they've done together is tainted by huge amounts of negativity. Couple likely to break up. While the couples that were likely to stay together, when they were asked how they felt about their partner, would say things like, oh, they have that little quirk, but honestly, overall, they're absolutely amazing. I adore them. They are the cutest and the best person ever, but they just drive me nuts with this little quirk, but it's going to be fine. This is a couple who's likely to stay together. Now, this sounds really simple, but black and white thinking is unfortunately quite common. In my case, it was definitely a part of the way that I was raised, when a culture where things are very black and white, good or bad, and there's no room for gray or in between. This can lead to very kind of distinguishing things and kind of a stunted growth in terms of emotional maturation and things in between. But also, if we might have this for other reasons, if we try to fix this, it's very helpful to see how it can be developed in children. And to use this, I'm going to talk about Bowlby again and his discussion around the good parent, bad parent mentality, because overriding this as an adult, I think, is definitely possible and has been definitely possible in my case. So I would really, really recommend it. Basically, when children are really, really young, all of them, this is healthy, this is fine. When they are toddlers, think of their parent not as one person, but as the good parent and the bad parent. So for example, the mom that gives you ice cream and lets you watch your favorite show and plays with you and doesn't tell you off is good mom. And when mom does things like take away your toys or puts you to bed when you don't want to, or tells you off, or doesn't listen to you or respond to you, or is busy, this is bad mom. Children, when they are really, really young, cannot bring these together and think that sometimes mum is good, sometimes mum is bad, but they always have this dichotomy of things. And evidence has shown that if a parent is highly inconsistent in the attention and affection and things that they give their children, so sometimes they are hot and they are really, really kind and nice and giving, and sometimes they switch, they are really, really bad, and this child will not have the ability to kind of bring these two parents together. So they might grow into adulthood thinking of people as either all good or either all bad. And I guess we all have these to various extents, because unfortunately, almost everyone has not have perfect, consistent parenting 100% of the time, but it depends on how extreme this thing is. So if you have the tendency to meet someone and say, oh my God, I'm absolutely in love, they're incredible, they are the best, I adore them, I cannot imagine my life without them, they are everything, and then they do something small that's wrong and you're like, I hate that person, they are trash, they need to get out of my life, cannot believe what I liked about them. Or you start a university degree and you're like, this is best, this is everything, this is the job, this is all I wanted. And then suddenly you don't enjoy it for whatever reason and you're like, I can't do this job, I hate it, this is the worst. Rather than thinking in a more rational way that sometimes things are good and bad, this can make life really, really distressing, relationships super, super anxious, and also leads to the breakdown of a lot of connections and friendships and things in the future. So if you are in this boat, one, trying to, in general, keep good and bad in mind, but also specifically in relationships and friendships, when things are not going too well, to try to consciously remind yourself of a laundry list of positive things of this person, to just try to get you in that state where you're like, okay, I can be more rational about this, if your brain naturally tends to like tunnel vision down the negative things only. Just as a caveat, this is said for non-toxic, non-dangerous things. If things are dangerous and toxic, let's not keep a positive in mind. Let's just make decisions and remove ourselves. But in general, this should be helpful. My next tip is also in the realm of relationships, and this has to do with language, because I cannot overstate how impactful language is. I think it's already clear from a lot of the things that I've mentioned. These are just words, phrases, questions, ways of arranging thoughts and words in my mind that make all the difference in how I interpret something, and therefore how anxious I become from it. Some of the most life-changing moments for me in therapy has been when my therapist will rephrase something that I said to highlight exactly what I'm expressing when I haven't thought that that's actually what I'm saying, or when I'm reinterpreting or given the words to rethink the things that I have experienced or been through or I'm thinking at the moment. So language is incredibly, incredibly powerful. And when it comes to communication with people, it's also one of the biggest determinants between how healthy and positive a communication will be and how negative it can be. So to reduce the sadness and anxiety in relationships, have a bit of advice that has been hugely impactful for me and absolutely mind-blowing. And this is to not discuss actions or accusations in the worst case, but to stick with feelings. I'm going to use a quick example. Say that I have a partner and my partner has not been consistently texting me recently, and I had an issue and they were kind of busy, so they didn't really help me with it. And now I feel as though they don't care about me and they haven't responded and they don't want to be with me anymore. So this will raise my anxiety through the roof. And then say because of this, I went up to my partner and said, you are never there for me anymore. And they would say, what? I'm always trying to help you. And I'm like, no, you're not. You barely even want to be with me, clearly. And they're like, I don't want to be with you. Why am I even here if I don't want to be with you? And this is the kind of conversation, clearly very ineffective, very unhelpful. The recommendation here for healthy communication is to not put accusations, as in, you don't care, you are not there for me, but rather to only stick to owning your feelings. So in this above scenario, what I would be feeling is quite sad, hurt, and scared. that I'm losing someone that I clearly care about, which is why I'm sad. If I went up to the person and I said, hey, I've actually been really hurt recently, and they'd say, oh my gosh, what happened? And I would say, well, when this happened, I felt hurt. And then that made me scared that you don't care about me and that I'm losing you, because that would make me feel really, really distressed. So could you reassure me about this? This completely changes the dynamic of the conversation and is much more likely to get to a place that is, one, where we are much more open to actually accepting what the person has experienced and why they behaved in that way. And two, for them to actually be open and accepting of the ways that we feel, which everyone should always be, and things are absolutely fine. Also, accusations and verbs as in, you are not there, you don't care about me, are potentially not true, while feelings are always true. The fact that you felt hurt is true. This is okay, no one can deny this. And the fact that you felt scared, this is true. No one can ever deny this. So it's really, really good to keep the conversation there. Michael Allen Singer said that when something provokes fear in us, we will automatically think that the person has done something wrong, but this is not necessarily the case. And fear is one of the feelings that gets raised the most in relationships. Fear that our friends don't like us, fear that we are not important to people, fear that people are about to leave us, fear that our relationships or friendships are not going well. The backbone of a lot of the stress and anxiety around relationships tends to be fear, at least in my case. And so identifying that and naming that, rather than saying, you're so annoying when you text, this is generally much more healthier and has made a huge difference for me in my friendships and relationships and things like that. Now, the last one is a massive one that I was debating to put in or not, because it's one of those things that I think is pure common sense, but I did not have this common sense. So if there's any single person out there who relates this like I would have, this is for you. Everyone else, sorry. So let's continue. This has to do with broadening my concept of personal hygiene. So, fully transparent, what I would consider personal hygiene was only the things that other people would see. So, are my clothes clean? Am I showered and washed? Do I smell good? Does my face look okay? Is my hair put together? This was personal hygiene. If someone comes over to my house, is my house looking okay? This was the full definition for, like, draw a square around it. This was it for personal hygiene for me. Then I grew up and I looked at people and I looked into people's families, and I was shocked, both in good ways or negative ways, but let's focus on the good ways. I was so surprised that fully grown adults like genuinely did sports, organized sports. People went on walks, people met their friends regularly. And I know this sounds ridiculous, but people actually drew lines and did not do work and prioritized things that I thought were just ridiculous, like moisturizing every day and things like that. This blew my mind. And so definitely only in my late 20s, I have massively broadened my definition of what it means to have good personal hygiene. And now it includes so much more. So it's not just smell and looks and that kind of stuff, but on the same level that I would consider brushing my teeth is, am I exercising every single day? Am I going to gym 3 to 4 times a week? Am I trying to get better at meditation? Am I, the thing that I'm working on now, which is the bane of my existence, am I sleeping healthily and regularly? Am I in touch with the people that I love as often as I need? Do I have spaces to feel useful to other people so I don't get anxious and feel useless and worthless? So all of these things are now included in my personal hygiene. So just as I'm like, well, I haven't washed my sheets this week, they're going to get washed, that's a no-brainer. On the same level is things like exercising, booking in, meeting people, and kind of feeling connected and staying in touch just all falls into this category. This is not wishy-washy. This is the absolute baseline of existence, and it makes such a huge, huge difference. I hate with a passion the fact that when I'm really depressed or down or anxious or just don't want to be around people and one of my friends drags me out on a walk, I hate that I feel better, because I've been inside for 2 weeks and I do not want to go outside and do not want to take a walk and move because I am sad and I want to do my thing, and I still cannot change this, by the way, but it actually genuinely helps. So now I am of the thought that, okay, it's fine if I'm in that state where I'm a hot mess. I cannot have the rational thinking to break out of this. But what I can do is preventative mental health. And preventative mental health is that when I'm, on my baseline, whatever that currently looks like, I will start incrementally adding all of these things to what my every week basically needs to look like. And that's how I maintain basically overall less anxious life, a lot less kind of low dips in general, and kind of maintain my health a bit higher and go like, yeah, I want to be the kind of person who's fit and does all of these things. And that's kind of how I see things at the moment. And I would really, really recommend this. The next time that you're slightly out of it, add something else. Add something else to your baseline weekly routine. And I think it will completely change the way that you experience things. Increasing healthy, non-negotiable activities is one of the biggest factors, I think, to change overall mental health. Now, just want to give a very big caveat. I do not have children. So I am 100,000,000% certain, seeing my friends with children, that once I do, these healthy routines and structures that I have in place will all disappear. And hopefully I will have some new balance, maybe a yearly routine or something like that. But at the moment, this is how I cope with things. So just wanted to mention that slightly. Now, before I move on to my concluding thoughts on the topic of anxiety, sadness, happiness, and calmness, I want to talk about one more thing, which is how I edit my videos. It is one of the most frequently asked questions on my channel. And the answers to these common questions are, yes, I do edit all of my videos all by myself. Yes, it does take me quite a bit of time. And also, the only course that I've ever taken on editing for YouTube is How to Edit on Final Cut Pro by Ali Abdal over on Skillshare. Skillshare are today very kindly sponsoring this video. So let me show you why this platform that you've heard about 1,000 times is absolutely incredible to join now. If you made it this far in this video and you resonate with me, you're slightly introverted, probably a bit creative, like doing things by yourself, hopefully a lot less anxious in the future, then I think editing is a great option for you. And I am genuinely trying to get my younger siblings into editing so they can edit for me too, but because it's such a good career and skill to have. A few months ago when I was considering leaving YouTube, my plan was to become an editor for other people. I think it's a job that's so much fun. You can do from your home. You can increase your skills exponentially. You can get to be super creative. And it's an absolutely easy thing to do. Ali's Skillshare class I watched in one evening. I edited and learned to edit in the same evening. Took me about 12 hours for a very amateur first video that you can see on my channel. And that's the only class I've ever referred back to in order to refresh things and kind of learn how to do things differently. It absolutely has everything that you need. And YouTubers are not saturated with editors. Genuinely, I barely get any legitimate asks for, no, actually I've never gotten a legitimate ask for someone to edit my videos. On Skillshare, the classes are short, they're succinct, they are to the point. You go 4 minutes, you can always refer back to it, and because of the fact that they're not bloated and heavy, and there are so many platforms that make that quite annoying, but on Skillshare, it's just really clear. You also, on Ali's class, I think you also have resources to edit your first video. So you have everything that you need over there, and you can genuinely learn the skill tonight. If editing is not your thing, there are things on photography or writing or anything like that. And please, if you have a YouTuber that you like, do reach out to them. I genuinely mean this. If you make something custom for them and you have a serious application, I don't think there's anyone who would not give you a response. I am one person who would love this by myself, so I genuinely mean it. There is a link in my description and it will give the first 1,000 people who click on it a free 1 month with Skillshare. It's free. Take advantage of this. See how you feel and how you fare with this. Ali's class, 10 out of 10 teaching, strongly would recommend to everyone. It is brilliant. So there's many industries and platforms and things that you can learn on Skillshare, but I 100% vouch for that class. It is absolutely brilliant. So I know this has been a super long one, so I'm sorry for keeping you a bit longer if you're here, but thanks. I just wanted to say I have not mentioned the biggest factor in determining anxiety and stress and sadness in my life, which is life circumstances, who you live with, where you live, how much money you have, stresses, who's alive or not alive in your life, how much of a strong group and connection do you have around you, how you're treated, how much control you have over things. And all of this, definitely a million times more important than anything else I mentioned today, but also very difficult to change and very case specific. So I haven't mentioned it, but just wanted to put that here too. It's definitely been the main cause of anxiety in my life, and the main reduction in it has come from this. But I also somehow managed to wind myself all the way up and create incredible levels of anxiety, having things basically stable-ish. So this video is still extremely relevant to me. And it was made because the most common questions on my Q&A that I was planning to do initially were around mental health and stress and anxiety. So I thought I'd make a very dedicated video to it because I could really not answer a question for 40 minutes in a Q&A. That would be absolutely ridiculous. And now I'm thinking I'll skip the Q&A altogether, but I'll answer the next most common questions. I already did the editing one, which was the second one. The third one was how tall I am, 5'3". not tall at all. And when it comes to which speciality I'm thinking of in medicine at the moment, 100% sold on anesthetics, but I change my mind a lot. So I'm really, really not sure. Otherwise, if you made it this far, you are definitely absolutely sick of my voice. So please leave. Thank you for being here. At some point though, you might want to check out my video on psychotherapy, because I go through basically years and years of therapy and break down my main life-changing moments and kind of exercises for doing that. So either if you've never been in therapy, or if you are or have been and want to compare notes, that might be super helpful. But otherwise, if you made it this far, thank you so much for spending this time with me. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Be kind to yourself and others, and don't believe everything you think. Thanks.